Thank you very much to all participants in this session, which will be the last in our academic year. We will, of course, have more Zoroastrian seminar series lectures on the next academic year. But today we will have the pleasure of having Professor Choksy. And before that, before presenting him, please let me thank first the participants and our sponsors. We are grateful to the Roshan Cultural Heritage Institute, the Encyclopedia Iranica Foundation, the Zoroastrian Federation of North America, and the Zoroastrian Society of Ontario for co-sponsoring this monthly lecture series. At the outset, I also like to express our solidarity with the inspiring women's movement in Iran and our collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people, and acknowledge this land on which the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be the home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live, learn, and teach on their ancestral homeland. After this, please, Professor Raffaelli, the floor is yours to introduce our speaker, Professor Choksy. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to briefly introduce Professor Choksy. I'm really honored to introduce him. I've been familiar with his scholarship since the times when I was a student. Professor Choksy is professor at Indiana University in Bloomington. The record of his academic activities is impressive on multiple levels. I will mention among his activities that as a consulting editor for Encyclopaedia Iranica and his books that range from topics such as purity and pollution in Zoroastrianism to the history of the Zoroastrian community in the early Islamic times. In addition to his books, he's also the author of numerous articles on topics that, again, range from the material culture of the Zoroastrians in the pre-Islamic times to Zoroastrian theology and practices in the modern times. So I'm really happy to introduce Professor Choksy, who's going to talk about a very interesting subject today, that is happiness in the Zoroastrian traditions of Iran and India. Professor Choksy.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking the University of Toronto's Institute for Iranian Studies, the Roshan Institute, the Encyclopedia Iranica Foundation, the Federation of Zoroastrian Associations in North America, the Zoroastrian Society of Ontario, all of them for inviting me to present today. And yes, it is my pleasure today to talk about happiness in the Zoroastrian traditions of Iran and India. Let's begin with some proclamations of ancient monarchs. Our Master is the great God who created this earth, who created that sky, who created humankind, who created happiness for humankind. Shayatim Ada Madhyaya, proclaimed Darius I in several of his old Persian inscriptions. Those words were duplicated by Xerxes, Artaxerxes the first and Artaxerxes the third. Far more than merely the lead-in for a claim to legitimate rule, although Darius and his successors did link their authority as sacrally bestowed by the ancient Iranian god through phrases like, who made Darius king, one king over many. So despite adding those phrases, the cosmogonical words at Naksha, Rostam, Persepolis, and other locations reflect a fundamentally religious concept of the divinity as bestower of happiness. Unhappiness came to be regarded as an undesirable experience caused by the lie, drauga, drug, drush, brought into the material world by Angramanu, Ahriman, the angry or evil spirit. Hence, the concept of Shiati included security for the people. Darius I realized that, to quote, if the Persian people are protected, happiness will be uninterrupted for the longest time. His Persepolis inscription, E 22 to 23. So protection was sought from Ahura Mazda, especially against, to quote, the enemy army, famine, and the lie. Again from Darius's Persepolis inscription. Yet all persons, not only rulers, also have to fulfill obligations to God and cosmic order or righteousness to merit happiness in Zoroastrian belief. Therefore, Darius's son and successor, Xerxes I, advised, if you should think, happy, Shiata, may I be while alive, and righteous or blessed, Artava, when dead, then have respect for the law that Ahura Mazda has established. Worship Ahura Mazda and follow righteousness. The person who has respect for the law that Ahura Mazda established worships Ahura Mazda and follows righteousness. That individual becomes both happy while alive and blessed when dead. Xerxes' Persepolis inscription. Many centuries later, using the Middle Persian and Parthian languages, the Sasanian king of King Narse claimed that the notables of Iran urged him to ascend the throne and govern with adherence to socio-religious codes on the grounds that so doing would result in, to quote, happiness to the kingdom, Shahar Shadi Baved, from the Paikuli inscription. Let's now look at revelations from Zarathustra. Earlier than the time of the Achaemenian kings and the Sasanians, happiness was recorded as a religious concept in the Avesta as Shaiti, also Shaya, to be in the state of happiness. Because Ahura Mazda was regarded as a wise lord, he was portrayed as the source of Shiati happiness joy for inhabitants of his material world. In the Gatha, Zarathustra claimed, happy, Shayato is the revelator who communicates with the all-knowing one. As revelator, Zarathustra went on to implore of his deity, Ahura Mazda, let evildoers be thwarted, let peace be established for those who seek to dwell in happiness. Subsequently, in the Yasna, devotees acknowledge that they will, to quote, abide in this worship, O Ahura Mazda, with happiness. Yasna 58, verse 3. Xerxes' the first recommendation of how to live a happy life, followed by a blessed afterlife, appears to be influenced by Zarathustra's declaration in the Gathas that whoever, man or woman, follows that which is best for existence will cross over the bridge of the requiter or recompenter. Gathas 46:10. To the place where right-mindedness is in agreement with righteousness, where power is in the command of good thought, and where Ahura Mazda dwells in happiness. Shayeti 46, verse 16. Other terms for happiness or joy are tested in the Avesta as well. The Gathas contain the word ranyo in reference to cattle, which by providing nutrition for humans are joy-bringing. Composers of the Yasna, who followed the teachings and rituals of Zarathustra, utilized urvasnam, joyful, when describing the experience of imbibing Homa, the Vedic Soma, the supposed elixir of immortality. To quote, intoxication from Homa is accompanied by joyful righteousness. Yasna 10, verse 8. If we move now to the advice and visions of medieval magi or Zoroastrian priests, we see that Middle Persian or Pahlavi rendered Old Persian Shiata and Shiyati as Shad, happy, and Shadi, happiness, respectively, and Avestan Urvasnam as Urvahanam, joyful, and Urvanami, joy. The Denkard, or Acts of the Religion, an encyclopedic textual summary by Adur Farobaki Farrokhzadan, who lived during the early 9th century of the Common Era, and Adur Badi Emedan, who lived in the early 10th century. These were two Zoroastrian Hudenan Peshobai, or leaders of the members of the good religion. The Denkard preserves Andars or Handars, wise sayings, religious advice, relating to the pursuit of happiness. One passage characterized the Zoroastrian faith as possessing, to quote, holiness, knowledge, happiness, shadi, prosperity, and abundance. Denkard 6, passage 185. Hence, according to these two high clerics, everyone needed to realize that, to quote, happiness and cheerfulness are goodness. Again, book CB 1418. And consequently, engage in actions that generate and facilitate experiencing of joyful emotions. Yet, happiness was expected not merely from experience that benefited only oneself, but that each person should be, to quote, be happy that good things come to other people too. Again, Denkard book 6, E35b. Persons who followed injunctions to generate and sustain joy were promised that, to quote, in the best place, that is heaven, there will be every happiness, hamog shadi, for their souls. Denkard book 5, 8, 11. The theme of happiness as recompense in the spiritual world was central to the Middle Persian writings of Manuschiri Juvanjam, another 9th century high magus, in his Daldestani Denig, or Book of Religious Judgments. To quote, righteous souls are happy, Shad, for having been saved from Angramanyu and brought to the realm of our master. Chapter 18:6, Manuschir wrote. He suggested that in heaven, the realm of our master, to quote, souls will receive praise, joy, urvam, peace and comfort from God. Chapter 4, section 4. Vahisht, New Persian Behesht, the best place of heaven, was believed to be filled with every comfort, pleasure, joy, bliss, and goodness, exceeding even the greatest and highest goodness and pleasure of the material world, according to Manuschir, chapter 25, section 3. The spiritual voyager Ardaviraz, who was described as a pious man rather than specifically a morbid or magus, and whose purported journey through the realms of the afterlife during the Sasanian period were recorded in Middle Persian during the 9th or 10th century of the Common Era, before being rendered into New Persian and Gujarati, and also into Sanskrit, was told that, to quote, happiness, shadi, is, to quote, the reward of the righteous ones. In Vahisht, Ardaviraz Nameh, chapter 10, lines 17 through 18, echoing the sentiments of King Xerxes from approximately 15 centuries previously. During his voyage, Ardaviraz is said to have received visual confirmation that Vahisht is indeed, to quote, a brilliant place of the greatest happiness, Wame ga-i vuzurtom shadi, chapter 19, section 14, a place full of worldly-like pleasures and gardens. And if I may just very briefly share my screen here, an image, women and men in this Indian manuscript from the middle 17th century, written in a combination of, copied in a combination of Middle Persian, Sanskrit, with some Gujarati as well. These scenes of heaven and the joyfulness of heaven. And we will return to the Ardaviraz Nameh later as well. Happiness at the end of the world would re-echo thematically in traditions ascribed to Jamaspa, seer to the legendary Kavi Vishtaspa, who was said to be the Prophet Zarathustra's patron. Middle Persian Pawzan, that is Middle Persian written in our Western script, and New Persian or Farsi versions of the Jamasnameh, Book of Jamaspa, anonymously dating from the 12th and 14th centuries of the Common Era, deplored people who during the final years of humankind's existence are said to make unethical choices and engage in bad deeds, because such decisions, to quote, will produce not happiness and therefore will not endure, which is a fundamental notion that happiness will endure, unhappiness will pass. Likewise, compilers of the Denkard connected eschatology to joy through theological assertions of a happy afterlife. To quote, this world was created by Ahura Mazda, so at the end of time, he will become happy, Shad, through it. Denkard, Book 6, 311. Now, Greek influences on the development of Iranian and Zoroastrian ideas of happiness cannot be discounted. Aristotle wrote extensively on happiness as perfect and self-sufficient, being the end to which our actions are directed. Nicomachean Ethics, Book 1, 7. Aristotle reasoned that by human goodness is meant goodness not of the body, but of the soul, and happiness also we define as the activity of the soul. Such ideas mesh fully with those of Zarathustra and probably were known to Persian kings and medieval magi, just as were other Greek concepts, such as the mean or moderation as a mechanism towards joy, which were also incorporated into Zoroastrian ethics. Happiness was mentioned in the 3rd century Common Era Middle Persian graffito at Euro-Europus. It's also used in 2 different contexts in the Bactrian documents. Bactrian documents are used to use shadow, both in the sense of happy and in the sense of satisfied. The latter usage particularly in mundane contractual phrases, such as, to quote, happy or satisfied and content with a contract. In a more socio-religious disposition, the opening section of Bactrian letters written between Zoroastrian name bearers during the 4th century Common Era formulately expressed personal happiness about their superiors' good health. To quote, I've heard that your lordship is healthy, therefore I am happy. But I would be more happy when I myself see your lordship is healthy. This seems to be a standard phrase in this correspondence. If I move now from the Sasanian times into the Islamic period, and look at usages among Parsis, other Indians, and contemporary Iranian Zoroastrians. The eponymous landing of Zoroastrian Iranians at Zanjan in Gujarat, attributed to the year 716 or the year 796 of the Common Era, depending on interpretation of the dates numerals, is recorded in a New Persian epic poem, the Qissa-e Zanjan, the story of Zanjan. Based upon older oral traditions, the Qissa itself was composed in the late 16th century by Behram Kaikobad Zanjana, a Zoroastrian priest. In recounting the creation of humans, the author wrote, to quote, you, namely God, put the soul in him, happy and joyful. Shadan o Khorram, right here in the opening part of the Qissa. Ahura Mazda was viewed as the bringer of happiness to those who are sad. Again, the opening section 1, line 20. And as having led the Parsis to Zanjan, where they could resettle, to quote, with happiness and calm, Bashadi or Aram. Like their ancestors and counterparts in Iran, the Zoroastrians of India continued believing that, to quote, good and meritorious deeds will be possessions and wealth in the spiritual world, which give happiness forever. According to a catechism compiled in Gujarati by Dastur Erasji Sorabji Merji Rana during the year 1896, chapter 14 of his Rebbe. Even now, during the 21st century, Parsi children are taught to sing a monajat, a fervent prayer or devotional song, asking their creator to quote, "Give us happiness always, Dejo amne shada sok." One aspect of happiness that developed a specific meaning, which has persisted into contemporary times, is the notion of shadi as marriage. Magi had enjoined each person's second duty as an adult was to enter into matrimony. For example, the Chidag Handar Ziporiot Keshan, the Select Councils of the Ancient Sages, section 5. So, not unexpectedly, happiness associated with marriage and family came to be designated the activity and designate the activity and ceremony as shadi and later sada in Gujarati, including Parsi Gujarati, Hindi, and Urdu on the Indian subcontinent. Even though the current Parsi term for the marriage ceremony is Ashirvad, and this rite of passage is also commonly referred to as Lagan. Monajat, known as Lagan Mubarak Badi Negit, song for the blessing of the wedding, still enjoins each Parsi Zoroastrian couple to quote, "Live forever in happiness." Sokti Raho Sada. Over time, the joy of marriage came to be symbolized in the feminine form as well, with shadi even becoming a personal name for women. Interviews of contemporary Iranian morbeds or Zoroastrian priests have yielded convictions such as, quote, "When someone has a good deed, that person is happy, and it will bring satisfaction in society and for the person. But if someone has done something bad and wrong, that person will not feel happy at all." Similar ideas persist as well among the Bedin or lay Zoroastrians, such as a farmer who commented that when the soul separates from the body upon death, if the person has done good deeds, then the soul leaves the body happily and comfortably. But if the person has done bad or unpleasant things or hurt someone, then it leaves the body unhappy and remains sad and sorrowful. Not surprisingly, the Arda Virarsname continues to be popular reading, and its presentations of joy in heaven and in hell still shape Zoroastrians' desires to achieve happiness during their lives. Additionally, happiness came to be closely associated with the Amesha Spenta or holy immortal Hordad, New Persian Hordad, who symbolizes wholeness and perfection, especially through the water and blood of mortal existence. So even at present, during the Gavagiri, the Zoroastrian Dari, in Zoroastrian Dari, it's Gogiri, the marriage ceremony, the officiating magus reminds each Iranian Zoroastrian couple the path of Khordad calls for perfection, so maintain a happy heart, spread happiness. These quotes from contemporary Iran come from the interviews conducted by Sarah Stewart and Mandana Morvanat, to whom I'm very grateful. Having looked at this, the sort of interpretations of happiness over time, let's return to a sort of the more fundamental notion of happiness, happiness as a primal creation. During the latter part of the 9th century of the Common Era, a Zoroastrian theologian named Farabi, also known as Dadek Iyashastan, produced the final major redaction of the Bundahishan, the Book of Primal Creation. The Bundahishan was based on lore transmitted via oral traditions for centuries, until finally codified in Middle Persian. Within the Bundahishan's cosmogonical chapter is preserved a tale that happiness was the original experience and emotion bestowed by God. He, to quote, "He, our master, first created the sky, bright, visible, very distant. He created all of creation within the sky. He created joy, urvamani, to aid the sky. He fashioned joy inside it, that is the sky, so that even now, during the age of mixture of good and evil, creation exists in joy. Chapter 1a, section 6. Thus, our Mazda's first intangible gift to the entire physical universe was happiness. It is a basic experience, fundamental virtue, and goal of existence. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. Okay, thanks.
We have plenty of time for questions and comments, yes.
Thanks a lot for this excellent, of course, fascinating presentation. And so whoever wants to ask questions, maybe raise your hands. Okay, I see already Gita Bahramipur. You're free to speak. Now you can ask your question.
Thank you so much for excellent presentation. And I was really impressed with all of the knowledge that you have and shared with me. But I have given different beliefs. So I don't know who to believe now. Because, when I was a little kid and I would just be sitting in Iran and I'd be going into my thoughts, and my grandmother says, stop it. Those thoughts makes you feel bad. You need to get out of them. I'm like, but I wanted that shoe so bad. This is that's desire. And that makes you really bad because you're expecting to get a shoes. You're not going to get a shoes and you're going to be sad. Then happiness will not be coming. As a matter of fact, you'll be so miserable because you don't get what you desire. And then my father passed away. And I wanted him, and I desired to have him so much that I realized that I can't have him. And I was so miserable. And then I realized if my desire doesn't fulfill, I feel sad. Happiness is coming is a desire. A desire that brought about but Joshua, not Abraham, but Joshua. I don't believe that Zoroastrians believe. They might believe in a good thought, which is worshiping God. Maybe we think about God bring us happiness. That's not something I don't believe any Zoroastrian believe. Happiness here, right now. We control it with our thoughts, words, and deeds. We're very present. We're not in our head. And we don't think God is a belief. But if you think God is a belief, please be my guest. But you're not Zoroastrian. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't catch the question. I see a personal viewpoint.
Is that is the happiness? What do you mean happiness coming? That means I'm miserable right now. I'm in hell. What do you mean?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The question is, what do you mean happiness is coming? My belief is happiness is here right now at this moment. That I'm with a great teacher like you and about 107 wonderful Zoroastrians, and they're learning from you just like me. What do you mean about happiness is coming? Because your belief and my belief as a Zoroastrian is different. I believe happiness is here right now, and you believe happiness is coming. Please clarify.
I think you misunderstood the quotations I was using. The point is that according to the Zoroastrian scriptures and according to the exegetical texts, happiness is an emotion. It is an experience provided by God. It is something we experience. It is something we can generate. So our actions create happiness. Our actions can create unhappiness. And that was what the texts have been saying. So I'm not quite sure where the light between us is. There are
my misunderstanding.
The way Zoroastrianism would present death is as an attack of evil, and therefore evil creates unhappiness, and therefore evil was intending to make you unhappy.
That's a thought. I'm sorry. Evil is in thought. Evil is not something. Zoroastrians do not believe. If we believe in a good thought, good word, good deed. good
And
thought.
the deeds
And
are
the
equally
deeds
as important.
will follow the thought. No, the deed will follow. If you're having a good thought that I'm going to help somebody, and then it will be an action. It would be a feeling, and then that thought generates a feeling. You know what? Thoughts are major part of Zoroastrianism.
They are
Please,
indeed.
I
You're
beg
absolutely
you
right.
to get
Go ahead.
online just today and see how far away Zoroastrian have moved in order to introduce thoughts in the society. Now everybody realizes we have thoughts. We never did realize we have thoughts.
I think we should move on to others.
Sorry, yes,
honestly.
I apologize. Yes, you're right. But thank you so much
But let me
for
just
correcting
say
me.
that
Thank you for
thoughts,
correcting me. Thank you.
Thoughts, as you pointed out, it's thought, words, and deeds. Thoughts alone don't generate actions. The thoughts will be taken and put into actions. And what Zoroastrianism emphasizes is that our thoughts have to be manifest. So other questions, please.
Yes. So
thank you so much. Excellent.
Thanks a lot. So I see actually a question in the chat box. So from Coca Karishma. So from your study, you referenced happiness as the reward for righteous deeds. However, as I have understood, doing the righteous deed is itself happiness with harmony, ushta. This is a subtle difference. Please comment respectfully.
So the point I'm making is that happiness both generates good deeds, and happiness is also a reward of having done the deeds. And this is what you see in the passages, whether it is coming from Xerxes all the way down to a modern belief, and that is the two go hand in hand. If you do a good deed, you are expected to, the belief is that you will feel happy, that you will create happiness in others, and that you will also be rewarded for it, and the reward for it will be further happiness. The belief is that you will have happiness in life and blessedness in the afterlife.
Yes, very good. Okay.
And I think one thing to keep in mind in academic discussions, I'm not talking about what I believe. I keep my beliefs completely away from academic presentations.
There is a question that actually has a kind of diachronic component here in the chat box by Jamsheed Barza. Has our perception of the happiness evolved over the long history of Zoroastrianism?
And I think, as we can see, as we look here, from Zarathustra down, we can see sort of the subtle modifications, but I think the fundamental notion that happiness is linked in Zoroastrian scripture and exegesis, the fundamental notion that happiness is a creation of our Mazda, and that it is a gift to humanity, and that it is something that we can manifest through our thoughts, our words, but most of all through our deeds. I think that fundamental aspect has not changed.
Very good. So other questions directly, because there are a couple of questions, but they're generally about Zoroastrianism. I'll be very happy to forward them to Professor Choksy. But first, if there's anyone else who wants to ask questions about the theme of today's presentation, you can do that. Okay, so maybe I can read the question that is here in the chat box. So from Human Razavi, based on your scholarship and research, would you say the Greeks, especially Aristotle's work, is directly influenced by Zoroastrian conceptions of happiness? Are they clearly similar text? Are there clearly similar textual similarities in the sources? And secondly, would you say the conception of happiness in this tradition has more spiritual, physical, or hybrid meaning and interpretations? So
I think those are two completely separate questions. The first, in terms of influences, like I said, when we look at certain other more very specific concepts, like the notion of the mean or moderation, there are certain concepts we can track far more clearly back to Greek thought. concepts like happiness tend to be far more universal. But it is also very clear that these are concepts that are influencing each other. I would say that these ideas go back and forth, that the Greek ideas, particularly those of Aristotle, were very likely known to Iranian scholars. Aristotelian thought was certainly widespread when we get to the Islamic period. And Aristotle and other Aristotelian works were available on the Iranian plateau. We know this, for example, even from Ibn Sina's own autobiography. So I would say that there's a lot of interconnection of ideas there. The second part of the question was, and I'm trying to find the question here. The second part of the question was...
if you want, I can read it again.
I have it up here, yes. The concept of happiness in this tradition has more spiritual, physical, or hybrid meanings. And again, I think the point of Zoroastrianism is that since in Zoroastrian belief, our Mazda creates the material world in perfection, there's the connection between the physical and the spiritual is constant. It is not separate. We're not looking at the, shall we say, a matter-spirit divide as in Christianity, or especially not, shall we say, a matter-spirit divide as, let's say, in Manichaeism. In Zoroastrianism, these are intrinsically connected. According to the Bundahishn, the Zoroastrian theological belief is that the human spirits assume corporeal form as warriors for Ahura Mazda. And therefore, by pursuing the goals of Ahura Mazda, they are essentially bringing about Ahura Mazda's wishes, which include happiness. So I wouldn't call it either spiritual, physical, or hybrid. These are essentially interconnected, almost inseparable. If you want to use sort of the Christian notion of what happens during the Mass of the Eucharist, from transubstantiation to consubstantiation, and I would say consubstantiation, the notion that they exist together, inseparable.
So there are two, actually I see two raised hands. One is from, first one, Roshan Rivetna. So I'll ask you to unmute because I muted Roshan Rivetna. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jamsheed. Really, this is a topic very close to my heart about happiness. And my refrigerator is littered with quotes about happiness. And one of them is, happiness is liking what you've got, not what you want. Another one is, doing what you like is freedom. Liking what you do is happiness. Now, Jamsheed, I would really appreciate if you could give me a quote from Zoroastrianism, maybe not right off the hat right now, but maybe later. A short quote from Zoroastrianism on happiness.
I mentioned this. I mentioned several today in the talk.
Yes.
You can pick the one you want. Send me an email, and I'll give you whether the Avestan or the Pahlavi or the Farsi or the Gujarati, and then the English translation. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like just a short quote, a short quote that I can put on my refrigerator.
Well, I mean, the one that I have always liked, and in fact, it's part of the title of the book by Bruce Lincoln, but Lincoln doesn't, in his description where he talks in, and this is where I began my talk today, this notion that, Ahura Mazda is the great God who created happiness for humankind. This notion that the divinity creates it. Interestingly, in his book, Lincoln talks about the Bundahishan, but he missed. He talks about the order of creation in the Bundahishan. He focuses on several passages in the Bundahishan, but as far as I can tell, he missed the passage where chapter 1a6, where we're told that Ahura Mazda first created the sky. He created all of creation within the sky. He created joy, okay, to aid the sky. He fashioned joy inside it in the sky, so that even now, during the age of combat, if you wish to, creation exists in joy. And I think the phrase to take from there is that creation exists in joy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Yep. Next question, next raised hand is actually Karishma. So. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Choksy, for that absolutely splendid spiritual, material, thought, action, synergistic understanding of happiness. My question to you is on the concept of two different related concepts to happiness that come up in the Gathas. The first is Tushna Maitish, contentment, that joy-filled contentment, which we are asked to focus upon. And the second is from Yasna 43:13, I think, which is a related concept of bliss, Rafeno. So you related the Ushta name in Ushta, but what about these two related concepts? And thank you once again.
So the first part, thank you so much. The first part that you focused on, could you just repeat the first part? Let's take them one by one.
The first is the concept of Tushna Maitish, which is translated as contented, meditative, mindfulness, that form.
Well, so, I mean, one can approach that from this viewpoint of, which in a sense also goes back to what Gita was saying. Desire in all its forms can be seen as getting in the way of happiness. Okay, so
may I put something to you while you've said that, although I hate to interrupt, and that is desire is also choice. So I don't see desire as negative from a Zoroastrian perspective, because I see desire as the concept of vairya. So when we say yatha ahu vairya, I am desiring that which is spiritual, that which is material, and the ahu and the ratu through righteousness with the gift of the good mind. So desire, is it necessarily against happiness, sir?
I would argue that wanting something, it goes back to your reasons. Okay, so if you want, you want to do something, let's say, notice the passage we had here that talked about that happiness is not just for oneself, it's also for others, right? This from the Denkat. And
also
so,
from the Gatha,
right. So the point here being that if you desire something that will benefit others, then that would be seen as a virtuous deed. If, on the other hand, you were desiring, let's say, to conquer the world, that would be, shall I say, more nebulous, because as we know, Darius himself justifies all of what we would see as violent deeds on the basis that he's installing order. And what we are getting into in some of this is the stuff that provides a lot of fodder for theologians. That is to debate these issues. What I was doing here is, as the title said, happiness in the Zoroastrian traditions. That is, how are these seen in the texts and in the interpretations, as opposed to how each of us may wish to parse out the issues.
Brilliantly said.
You did have a second part to your question.
I did, sir. Thank you for remembering. That is Yasna 43, I think it's 13, where it says, it's really what you said just now so beautifully from the Gathas, which says, through Sarosha, the concept of, if you like, spiritual listening, or other people would say the Yadata Sarosha, I consider thee, O Aurum, as the bountiful. So the word for bountiful over there, I think it's Spentem. So the concept of bountiful, the concept of listening through Sarosh to Aurum Mazda itself brings the concept of happiness. But the word there used is not happiness. It's not Ushta. It is Rafenim. And that's a concept that Kangaji translates as bliss. So I was wondering if you wanted to relate these slightly, I would say again, in the way beautifully that you have done, spiritual and physical concepts related to this.
Well, a lot of Zoroastrian concepts, as you know, are connected to one another, and they're connected by ultimately the notion of asha, of order, of righteousness. Okay, so happiness is one product, if you wish to, of following the right path, if you wish, if you want to put it like that. Okay, bountifulness is another aspect of it. These are outcomes as well. These are outcomes of it, of essentially of adhering to asha.
Absolutely brilliant conclusion. You've concluded with the Ashem Bahu as the one formula for all forms of happiness. Thank you so much.
Yes, or order or righteousness is best in Zoroastrian belief, and that's essentially what it comes down to. Everything flows from that. But of course, as history shows us, how humans choose to interpret order. I mean, and Darius the Great is perhaps the best example of someone who, in his interpretation, is imposing order. If you are at the receiving end of that imposition of order, you may have a very different point of view.
Very well said. Unless, of course, we believe in Frasho Kereti to go forward through Asha and for the good of all.
One thing I point out when I talk about some of these ideas to my students, I point out that one can sort of think about the passage in the Shahnameh where Sorab talks about trying to find his father Rostam with the desire that once he and his father are together, that they can bring order to the kingdom. In a modern context, one can think of the encounter between Luke and his father, Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, again, the concept of father and son together will bring order to the universe. We may not like that dark image. But permeating through it is, if you wish to, an idea that order is necessary. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to push this audience here, as I push my students to think about the aspects of because Darius imposes order, while while his satraps and satrapies are rebelling. He's victorious, and so his version becomes the canonical version. If he had lost out. If you think about the image of Ardashir at Naqsh Rostam, of Ardashir the first receiving the diadem of kingship from Aurum Mazda, and of the two figures being trampled on by the horses. Ardashir's horse is trampling the last Parthian monarch, and Aurum Mazda's horse is trampling Ahriman, as you can say, from the serpents in the hair coils. So from the interpretation of Ardashir, the Parthian monarchs were, shall we say, deviants from the path of what the Sasanians would claim was correct Zoroastrianism. So, we can debate a lot of these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Maybe there's time perhaps for another question for the answer to another question I'm reading in the chat box that is from Fred Mirza. So if you could please repeat the connections between the Gujarati term Shahadi, wedding, and happiness. And does your research relate to happiness as a state of mind? Would you say that since mind relates to wisdom, wisdom is the source of happiness?
Oh yeah, I see the questions here. Okay, yes. So the notion of happiness, shadi, in a very specialized sense, comes to be used in the Indian subcontinent to also represent not just become a woman's name, but it also becomes a generic term for, shall we say, the bliss, if you wish to, the joy, the happiness of a union between two individuals. And so this becomes a common term in Hindi and other Indic languages. For one. So I was pointing that out. The second question here is happiness as a state of mind. Well, again, the Zoroastrian textual tradition would indicate that happiness is not merely a state of mind. It is a state of existence. In other words, it's not just an emotion. Yes, it is an emotion. Granted or feeling granted by God, but it's also a physical state. It's a corporeal creation, according to the textual sources. And your reference to knowledge or wisdom, karad, the connection there would be that choosing thoughts, words, and deeds that produce happiness is a wise choice. According to this, that would be the way the Zoroastrian tradition would see this. That is a wise choice, whereas choosing to do things or say things or think thoughts that generate unhappiness for yourself, for your family, or for anyone else would be seen as choosing the path of drauga, drug, rather than choosing the path of asha.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Well, we had a long Q&A session, so unfortunately we do not really have time for other questions, but I will for starters, thanks again, Professor Choksy, and all those who participated in the presentation and in the question and answer session. Also, I would actually let Professor Miguel Ángel Andrés Toledo say one last word, final word.
First of all, let me again thank Professor Choksy and all the audience for being here. I remind you, sorry, that we will have further seminar series on Zoroastrian topics in the fall with new speakers, and I please recommend you to stay in touch and to see all the program that we will publish very soon, hopefully. And thanks again to all of you. This is the last session of the academic year. And in connection with the topic of today's talk, let me just finish with a typical ending in the colophons of Zoroastrian manuscripts, which would be completed with joy, peace, and happiness.
Correct.
Thank you very much to all of you.
No, and Miguel, you're absolutely correct. In fact, for lack of time, I edited that out of my presentation. I had originally intended to end with exactly that, pointing out that it's a long-established Zoroastrian tradition that the authors and copyists and translators would end with phrases that always included that the notion that the work has been completed with happiness. So let me wish all of you Shadi, go for the summer ahead. May we put the drauga of COVID behind us, and may we all be able to hopefully gather in person more and more. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Enrico and Miguel, for inviting me. And thank you so much for the Iranian Studies Institute for hosting me. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.